first thing I noticed wasn't the smell. People always say that about funeral homes. They talk about chemicals, about sweetness layered over decay. That wasn't it. What I noticed was the silence. Not the respectful kind. Not the hushed, reverent quiet you expect in places built for grief. This was different. Heavy. As if sound itself was being absorbed before it could echo. The building sat on the edge of a small Ohio town, the kind of place with a single traffic light and a volunteer fire department. White clapboard exterior. Green shutters. A flag out front that hadn't been raised or lowered in a long time. It just hung there, twisted slightly as if forgotten mid-motion. The sign read Hawthorne and Sons Funeral Service, established 1896. There were no sons listed anymore. I was there because the county requested a compliance audit. I worked for a private firm contracted by several Midwestern states to inspect funeral homes, crematories, and mortuary storage facilities. Paperwork, chain of custody, refrigeration logs, death certificates matched against intake records. Routine. Except Hawthorne and Sons had failed its last 2 inspections without explanation. The previous auditor quit 3 weeks after submitting a partial report. No formal complaint. No follow-up. Just resignation. I arrived on a Monday morning in late January. Snow had been falling all night, and the parking lot hadn't been plowed. My car left deep tracks as I pulled in, the tires crunching over ice that had been compacted by time, not traffic. No other vehicles. Inside, the door chimed softly. A thin, tired sound. The lobby looked untouched. Not clean, just static. Furniture placed decades ago and never moved again. The carpet showed paths worn into it like trails in an abandoned field. Photographs lined the walls. Black and white portraits of men in dark suits, each labeled with a name and date. All Hawthorne's. The last photo was from 1974. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. The building made noises, old building noises, but none of them felt natural. Pipes ticking, yes, but out of rhythm. A faint hum, too low to be mechanical. I checked my watch. 9:07 a.m. I had called ahead. I was expected. After a minute, a man emerged from a hallway to the right. Tall, thin, maybe late 50s. His suit looked funeral appropriate but wrong somehow, like it had been tailored for someone else years ago and never adjusted. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was calm, neutral, almost flat. I introduced myself, explained the audit. He nodded once. "I'm Daniel Mercer," he said. "Current director." He didn't offer his hand. As he led me deeper into the building, I noticed something else. The temperature. Funeral homes are kept cool, but this was colder than regulation. Not freezer cold. Just persistently, uncomfortably low. Cold enough that after 5 minutes, my fingers ached. Mercer noticed me rubbing my hands. "Old system," he said. "Hard to balance." We started with paperwork. His office was small and windowless. Filing cabinets lined the walls. He handed me a stack of logs without comment. Everything was almost correct. Dates matched. Names were spelled properly. Signatures present. But the numbers didn't sit right. Intake versus release times. Storage durations that were too long by a day or two. Bodies listed as cremated with no corresponding ash release. Minor discrepancies individually. Collectively, they formed a pattern. "How many cases do you average per month?" I asked. "Depends on the season," he said. "Winter." I pressed. He gave me a number that didn't align with the logs. When I pointed it out, he didn't argue. He just looked at the paper, then back at me. "Records were handled differently before I took over," he said. "When did you take over?" I asked. He paused. 6 years ago. That would have been 2019. But county records showed Hawthorne and Sons had no ownership change since 2003. I noted it. After paperwork came the facility inspection. Preparation rooms first. Stainless steel tables. Drainage. Instruments laid out neatly. Too neatly. No signs of recent use, yet the logs indicated multiple cases in the past week. "Where are the bodies currently stored?" I asked. "Basement," Mercer said. "I'll take you." The stairs down were narrow and steep. Concrete walls. Bare bulbs. As we descended, the hum grew louder. Not machinery, more like vibration. The refrigeration units lined one wall. Old industrial models retrofitted repeatedly. Each unit had a tag clipped to the handle with a name and date. I counted. There were 12 units, only 8 tags. Where are the others? I asked. Mercer didn't answer immediately. Some units are offline, he said finally. Why? Power constraints. I opened one of the active units with his permission. Inside was a body bag zipped and labeled. Everything appeared normal. I opened another. Empty. No bag. No tray. Just bare metal lightly frosted. Do you document transfers off-site? I asked. Yes. They're not in the logs. He looked at me for a long time then. Some families request privacy, he said. That's not how the law works, I replied. The silence returned. We continued. Embalming room, viewing rooms, chapel. Everything felt unused yet preserved, like a place waiting rather than operating. Then we reached a door at the far end of the basement corridor. It was unmarked. What's this? I asked. Storage, Mercer said. For what? Archived materials. I asked to see it. He hesitated, just for a second, then unlocked the door. The room was colder than the rest of the basement. No refrigeration units inside, just shelves, metal shelves. They were filled with boxes, not cardboard, gray sealed containers, uniform in size, each labeled with a name and a year. The years went back decades. Some names matched the photographs upstairs. These are? I started. Personal effects, Mercer said quickly. Items families didn't claim. I picked one up. It was heavier than it should have been. What's inside? I asked. He didn't answer. I opened it. Inside was a sealed plastic bag. Inside that, fabric. Dark. Folded carefully. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. Skin. Human skin. Preserved. Treated. Cut in large sections, edges clean. I dropped the box. Mercer closed the door. You weren't supposed to open that, he said, his voice still calm. I backed away. What is this place? I asked. It's a funeral home, he said. I demanded to leave. Immediately. He didn't stop me. Outside, the cold air felt warmer than the basement. I sat in my car for a long time, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I had misunderstood. I called my supervisor. Left a message. No answer. That night, I reviewed the public death records for the town. There were gaps. Entire months where deaths were recorded but burial locations were listed as pending indefinitely. Families who had moved away. Elderly residents with no next of kin. People who wouldn't be missed loudly. The next morning, I returned with intent to shut the place down pending investigation. The building was locked. No lights. The flag was gone. County records showed Hawthorne and Sons had closed permanently overnight. No transfer paperwork. No notice. When state investigators finally entered the building 3 days later, the basement room was empty. The boxes were gone. So were the refrigeration units. The walls showed scrape marks as if heavy equipment had been dragged out quickly. No remains were recovered. No charges were filed. Daniel Mercer was never found. Officially, Hawthorne and Sons is listed as ceased operations. Unofficially, the families are still waiting. And sometimes, when I audit older facilities now, I find something strange. A storage room that's too cold. A box that's too heavy. A name that shouldn't still be here. I didn't know Thomas Bell, not really. I knew his handwriting. That's what stayed with me. The way he wrote dates, carefully underlined, like he was afraid they might drift if he didn't pin them down. I only met him once, briefly, at a diner off Highway 67, and even then he didn't tell me his name. He just slid a notebook across the table and asked if I worked for the state. I told him I did. That was a lie. I worked contract security audits for private insurers, the kind that reviewed facilities after something had already gone wrong. Fires, floods, lawsuits, deaths with paperwork problems. Funeral homes were part of it. What made Thomas nervous wasn't death. It was time. The notebook he gave me covered 4 years of night shifts at Marlowe and Pierce Funeral Home, a family-run establishment in northern Arkansas that had been operating since the 1930s. The building sat alone at the edge of town, backed by woods that locals said flooded in spring and froze hard in winter. Thomas was the night watchman. His job was simple. Lock up at 7 p.m., check doors every hour, log temperatures in the refrigeration units, and make sure no one broke in. The funeral directors didn't like staying late. Too quiet, they said. The journal started normally. January 3, 2018, 7:05 p.m. All doors locked. 2 bodies in cold storage. Temp holding at 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Routine entries. Repetitive. Almost comforting in their predictability. Then, slowly, the language changed. March 14, 2018, 1:12 a.m. Basement light on again. Turned it off. There was no basement listed in the official building plans. When I asked Thomas about that during our diner meeting, he stirred his coffee without looking up. They call it crawl space, he said. But you can stand in it. The funeral home had been expanded in stages over decades. Additions built over additions. The original foundation was stone, uneven, and extended farther back than the current structure. Why didn't you report it? I asked. He shrugged. Didn't think it mattered. By mid-2019, the journal entries started mentioning sounds. Not voices, just movement. August 22, 2019, 2:40 a.m. Something shifted under prep room. Pipes maybe. Log noise. But the prep room didn't have pipes running beneath it. According to maintenance records, all plumbing had been rerouted during a renovation in 2004. Thomas didn't know that. What he knew was that the noises only happened on nights when the refrigeration units were full. Marlowe and Pierce serviced several surrounding counties. They handled accidents, overdoses, winter deaths from exposure. Bodies came in at all hours. Sometimes families couldn't afford immediate burial or cremation. Storage periods stretched. That's where the gaps began. Thomas recorded temperatures every hour like he was supposed to. But starting late 2020, the numbers didn't make sense. November 9, 2020, 12 a.m. Unit number 3 at 34 degrees Fahrenheit. 1 a.m., 34 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 a.m., 34 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 a.m., 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfectly static. Industrial refrigeration units fluctuate, even by a degree. When Thomas mentioned this to one of the directors, he was told the system had been upgraded. Don't worry about it, they said. Then came the missing counts. February 17, 2021, 11 p.m. Logged 5 bodies at intake. Counted 4 in units. Recheck. Still 4. He wrote that entry 3 times in different pens. Crossed it out. Wrote it again. The next morning, the intake log was corrected. 1 name removed. Listed as transferred. Transferred where? No off-site facility was recorded. Thomas started checking tags more carefully. Reading names, dates, comparing them to the paperwork left on the desk upstairs. Sometimes the names didn't match. Not swapped. Just close. Similar ages. Same first initial. As if someone assumed no one would look too hard. By summer, Thomas stopped going into the basement unless he had to. He wrote about the smell, not decay but dampness like old earth turned over. He also wrote about lights. June 2, 2021, 3:18 a.m. Light visible under basement door. I did not turn it on. There was no switch at the top of the stairs. The basement lights were controlled by a pull chain inside the space. Thomas knew this because he'd been shown the area once during training. Emergency access, they called it. Old shelves. Old tools. No mention of storage. In August, a body went missing officially. An elderly man. No family. Died during a heat wave. Intake recorded. Toe tag assigned. Stored in unit number 2. When the county medical examiner arrived 2 days later, the unit was empty. Marlowe and Pierce claimed a clerical error. Thomas wrote, August 14, 2021. I saw him Tuesday night. Blue tag. Name was Randall. That was the first time he used a name instead of body. After that, the journal changed tone completely. The entries grew longer. More emotional. Less formal. Thomas wrote that he started dreaming about the building while awake. That sometimes, during rounds, he'd forget where he was for a few seconds, like the layout had shifted when he wasn't looking. He wrote about hearing something being dragged slowly across concrete beneath his feet. He wrote that the refrigeration unit seemed to hum louder when fewer bodies were inside, as if compensating. In December, during a snowstorm, the power went out. The backup generator kicked in for the main floor, but the basement went dark. Thomas went down with a flashlight. He wrote 6 pages about that night. The crawl space was larger than he remembered. The floor uneven, dug out deeper in places. The walls weren't stone anymore. Some sections were reinforced with newer concrete. There were hooks set into the ceiling. Not meat hooks. Something heavier. He wrote that he found bags down there. Not body bags. Thick plastic, sealed, stacked along the wall. He didn't open them. He didn't have to. The smell was wrong. When the power returned, the basement light was already on. The journal ends abruptly. January 6, 2022. They told me not to worry. They said it's always been this way. That's the last entry. 3 weeks later, Thomas Bell was reported missing. His car was found parked behind the funeral home. He's inside. Wallet on the seat. No sign of a struggle. Marlowe and Pierce closed 2 months later, citing financial difficulties. When the building was inspected, the basement had been sealed with fresh concrete. No access point remained. Ground-penetrating radar was requested but never approved. There was no probable cause. The official count of missing remains connected to the funeral home is 7. Unofficially, families still call the county asking where their loved ones are. I submitted copies of the journal to my firm. They told me it wasn't actionable. Sometimes, late at night, I reread Thomas's handwriting. The dates stay underlined, as if time itself was the thing he was trying to keep from disappearing. I didn't go looking for this story. It came to me as a footnote. I was reviewing cold weather transfer protocols for a regional coroner's office in northern Minnesota. My task was administrative: verify which funeral homes handled winter pickups when roads closed, when lakes froze, when helicopters couldn't fly. Most counties had backup agreements. Redundancy mattered when temperatures dropped below zero and bodies couldn't wait. That's when I noticed a name I couldn't place. North Star Mortuary Services. Listed as inactive, but still referenced in transfer logs as late as 2014. No address. No phone number. No license number. Just a route. Winter transport, Route 12. Route 12 ran west out of town, along the tree line, past a frozen lake and into nothing. It wasn't a state highway anymore. It had been decommissioned years earlier, maintained just enough for snowplows to turn around. I asked the clerk about it. She frowned. "That's old," she said. "They don't use that anymore." "Who did?" I asked. She shrugged. "Before my time." Records showed North Star had been contracted for winter-only services starting in 1972. Their role was specific: retrieve remains from rural properties when roads were impassable and deliver them to licensed facilities once conditions improved. They were paid per transfer. Hundreds of transfers. But there were no intake confirmations from receiving funeral homes. Just departures. I drove Route 12 the next morning. The road narrowed quickly. Trees leaned in. Snowbanks rose higher than my hood. There were no houses past the first mile. No cell signal by the third. At mile marker 7 I saw it. A building set back from the road, partially hidden by pines. Wooden. 2 stories. Unmarked. The driveway was plowed. Freshly. I parked at the edge of the road and walked the rest of the way. The air was sharp enough to burn my lungs. My boots crunched over ice layered with new snow. The building looked like it had been expanded repeatedly. Original structure old, maybe early 1900s. Additions slapped on over time. Corrugated metal siding in places. Windows boarded from the inside. There was no sign. No license posted. Just a single light glowing faintly behind frosted glass. I knocked. It took a long time before the door opened. A woman stood there, bundled in layers, gray hair pulled back tight. She didn't look surprised to see me. "You're late," she said. "I think you have the wrong..." I started. "You always say that," she replied, then stepped aside. The warmth inside was immediate and unnatural. Too warm. The kind of heat that dries your throat instantly. The interior smelled faintly of disinfectant and wood smoke. "What is this place?" I asked. She closed the door behind me. "This was North Star," she said, "before they made us disappear." Her name was Evelyn Rook. She said her family had operated winter transfer services long before the county cared what happened to bodies in January. When roads froze, when lakes became the only access, North Star moved the dead. People didn't ask questions, she said. They just wanted them gone. I asked why there were no records of deliveries. Evelyn smiled without humor. Because we weren't delivering, she said. She showed me the logbooks. Handwritten. Decades of entries. Dates. Names. Pickup locations. Always winter. Always Route 12. And always the same note at the end. Held until thaw. How many did you hold? I asked. All of them, she said. She led me downstairs. The basement wasn't a basement. It was carved out of the earth, reinforced with timber and stone. The air down there was colder but stable. Permafrost, she explained. Natural refrigeration. Rows of shelves lined the walls. On them, wooden boxes. Simple. Unmarked. Hundreds. Where are the bodies now? I asked. She looked at me carefully. Do you know what happens when you freeze something for 50 years? She asked. Not just cold. Reserved. Waiting. I realized then what Route 12 really was. Not a road. A boundary. North Star wasn't transporting bodies. They were removing them from the system. People who died alone. People found late. People whose paperwork lagged behind the weather. No families pushing. No timelines. The county paid. The logs were written. And winter swallowed the rest. Why didn't anyone notice? I asked. Evelyn gestured upward. Because by spring, everyone forgets winter. I left that building shaken, my report unfinished. When I returned with state officials 2 weeks later, Route 12 was blocked. The building was gone. Not burned. Not demolished. Gone. The clearing was smooth, snow-covered, undisturbed. Ground-penetrating radar was requested. Denied. North Star Mortuary Services was officially declared never licensed. The transfer logs were labeled clerical artifacts. Evelyn Rook does not exist in public records. But every winter, when temperatures drop and roads close, a few rural death reports list a familiar phrase under transport notes. Delayed due to weather. No follow-up. No delivery confirmation. And Route 12 still gets plowed.